We hear it all the time, right? These amazing stories about India's infrastructure boom. World-class highways, record-breaking construction. It sounds incredible. But then you step outside, you get on your bike, you try to walk down the street, you drive to work, and the story feels, well, completely different. So let's dive into this huge gap between the headlines we all read and the reality we live on our roads every single day. All right, first up, let's talk about the great disconnect. This is really the heart of the whole issue. The massive difference between the grand story we're being told and the, let's be honest, bumpy reality we have to deal with day in and day out. So, on one side, you've got these incredible headlines: world-class infrastructure, building for the future. It all sounds fantastic. But then you look at the reality for millions of people: roads that just completely collapse after the first monsoon, brand new highways that somehow start cracking within a few months. It's a stark contrast. And all of this just boils down to one simple but really important question, doesn't it? If everything is as world-class as they say, why does just getting from point A to point B still feel like you're in survival mode? So, what does this survival mode actually look like on the ground? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of that daily struggle that defines commuting for so many of us. You know where we have to start: the pothole. It's become the most infamous feature of Indian roads. It's gone from being this, predictable annoyance during the monsoon to a year-round, life-threatening danger. It's so common now that it's tragically become a bit of a national joke. And you have to ask, why does this keep happening over and over again? Well, it's a pretty predictable cycle. It usually starts with poor quality materials and rush deadlines because everyone's trying to cut costs. The contractors are focused on their profit margins, not the lifespan of the road. So what we're left with is endless, temporary patchwork instead of a real, permanent solution. And this is where the disconnect gets almost absurd. We hear these grand promises about smart cities and urban transformation, but what's the actual reality for a person just trying to walk? They're forced to walk on the road, literally jumping over open drains and dodging traffic, all because footpaths are broken, blocked, or just don't exist. You often hear people say, oh, the chaos on our roads, it's just part of our culture. But let's be really clear about this. It's not. The constant lane cutting, the unpredictable swerving, that isn't culture. It's a direct result of bad design. When you don't have clear lanes, proper signs, or even visible stop lines, chaos is what you get. And just think about this for a second. Two-wheelers make up this massive portion of vehicles on our roads. We're talking crores of them. These are our daily commuters, the working class. And yet, they are the single most ignored group when it comes to planning our infrastructure. No dedicated lanes, no safety buffers. Isn't any surprise they tragically make up the majority of accident victims? Okay, so we've looked at the symptoms, the potholes, the chaos, the danger. But to find a real solution, we have to dig a little deeper. We need to ask the tough question: why is the system itself failing? Now look, to be fair, it's not all bad news. There has been some serious progress in certain areas, and we have to give credit where it's due. We've seen massive highway construction projects like Bharatmala, new state-of-the-art expressways, and hey, FasTag has definitely made toll booths a lot less chaotic. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. That progress is almost exclusively on the major national highways that connect the big cities. The roads that you and I use every single day, the city roads, the local neighborhood roads, that's a completely different story. They're still largely ignored and in pretty terrible shape. This right here, this perfectly captures the total lack of coordination that dooms so many of our roads from the very beginning. One department comes in and lays a perfect, brand new road. Then a few weeks later, another department digs it all up to lay some cables. And just when that's fixed, a third one comes and breaks it again for drainage pipes. It's a classic case of nobody talking to each other. And this brings us to what might be the single biggest issue of all: accountability. Or really, the lack of it. In other countries, when a bridge collapses or a new road fails, engineers are questioned and companies get blacklisted. There are real-world consequences. But here? Well, the files move from one desk to another, the news cycle moves on, and fundamentally, nothing really changes for the next time. All right, but just pointing out all the problems isn't really enough, is it? So what would a practical blueprint for actually fixing this mess look like? Let's talk solutions. Look, these aren't some radical, out-there ideas. They're just logical, pro-citizen steps. It starts with real accountability through strict, independent quality audits. Then, a fundamental shift in mindset. designed for people who walk first, not as an afterthought. That means dedicated, safe lanes for our millions of bikers. And for goodness sake, fix the drainage before you lay the road. Finally, let's have total transparency. Public dashboards so we can all see who built the road, how our money was spent, and who's responsible for fixing it. You know, when you step back and look at this whole picture, it really forces us to reconsider what progress even means. What is the true measure of a developed nation's infrastructure? And that brings us to a really powerful way of thinking about it. The mark of a truly developed nation isn't about having the most flyovers or the shiniest expressways. The real test is much simpler. It's whether a child can walk safely to school. It's whether a person on a two-wheeler can get to work and back home securely. It's about human safety, period. Because until we make that fundamental shift in our thinking, our roads will continue to be exactly this: fast on paper, but dangerous in reality. And that leaves us all with a final question to think about. What is the real price we're paying for this version of progress?